Hi, I'm Jeremy Robinson and this is the 19th hole. Hi, I'm Jeremy Robinson and welcome to the 19th hole, Black Star Golf's podcast presented by Glyle.uk. So far, we've had a couple of former tour players on, so today I'm delighted to be joined by two guys from the coaching and performance side of the game. Firstly, one of the most well-respected coaches in the game, Gary Nicol. Gary has coached many Ryder Cup players, including Peter Baker, Paul Broadhurst and the late Gordon Brand Jr., and now bases himself out of the superb Archerfield Links up in Scotland. Also joining today is the brilliant sports performance coach, Karl Morris. Karl again has helped many Ryder Cup players, including Darren Clarke, who went on to win the Open Championship in 2011. In addition, Karl's worked with Graham McDowell and South African Louis Easterhuizen. Of course, both these guys went on to be major champions. Karl's also worked with top-class international cricketers and Premier League footballers. And together, the guys have written 3 very successful books, The Lost Art of Putting, Playing Golf and Short Game, which we will get on to later. So welcome, guys, and thanks very, very much in joining us today. The first kind of question is, and just keep this brief, because the last guy we had on was Wei, and he got carried away a bit with this question, and we went on for a long time, but anyway, there you go. So just keep briefly, Gary, if you start, how did you kind of get into golf?
My route or journey into golf was pretty easy, to be honest. My late father was a golf writer, so I've been around golf and golfers all my life. So it wasn't really, my dad was a very keen golfer. He wasn't a brilliant golfer, but he was a very keen golfer, but he was always around the golf scene. So for me, it was a kind of natural entry point into the game through him.
Yeah, that seems like a common denominator for quite a few players. Paul Wei's dad was keen. Rico's dad, Steve Richardson, who we had on, was keen, and so you know, I grew up next to a golf course. So there's always kind of something that kind of draws you into it, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Although I always wanted to be a footballer rather than a golfer, but it turned out I wasn't. I was probably a slightly better golfer than I was a footballer, so wasn't that great at either of them, to be honest. But there you go.
And Karl?
Yeah, I'm going to be the black sheep here, Jeremy, unfortunately, because complete opposite, really, that my neither of my parents played, no interest in golf whatsoever. And I came to golf through cricket, bizarrely enough, in the sense that cricket was my first love. It probably still is, actually. Yeah. I was a decent cricketer, and a couple of the lads at the cricket club at the team where I played started playing golf at the local 9-hole course. And they said one day, do you fancy coming and having a game? And well, why not? I was reasonable at most sports and went down there. And 18 months later, all the cricket equipment had been sold, and all the pads had gone somewhere else, and all the rest of it. And my cricket career ended, and I got drawn into this crazy game. And 40 years later, we're still asking questions about it all.
So presumably, with the cricket, you're a batsman, were you?
No, I was actually I was a really kind of I was a dour Jeff Boycottian batsman, where I could sort of stay in for a while, but I wouldn't score many runs, so I'd be absolutely useless in the modern day. Yeah. But I was a quick bowler. I could sling it down pretty quick, and there was a part of me in those days that quite enjoyed seeing people scared at the other end. So that was the bit that appealed to me.
I'm impressed. Me being a Yorkshireman, I'm impressed that you must be a Lancastrian. Mentioning Jeff Boycott.
Do you know one of the crazy things about that? Looking back on it, he was absolutely a hero of mine.
Right.
As a kid growing up, and you know, when I think about it now, I'm Lancastrian through and through, and I'm thinking, what the hell was I worshipping a Yorkshireman for? But he was the first guy I would always look for the cricket scores, and every single match, the first thing I'd look for was to see how many runs Boycott had got. And I think what appealed to me more than anything else, looking back at it, was his work ethic, and the fact that he wasn't probably the most gifted player of all time, but just got the best out of his ability, worked at the game. I mean, I met him many years later, and it was a sort of certainly an interesting character. We could do 12 podcasts on Jeff Boycott, couldn't we? But that's for another day.
Mm-hmm. So both of you then, the next kind of question is, obviously you enjoyed playing golf, etc., but what kind of drew you to to the coaching and the performance side of it? Just start with you again, Gary. More the coaching of the swing, I suppose.
Yeah, while I love playing golf, I guess I didn't realise it at the time. I was spending a lot more time paying attention to what other people were doing. Figure out why they were beating me, why they were better than me. I played a lot when I was kind of in my mid to late teens. I played a lot with Andrew Oldcorn and the late Adam Hunter.
Yeah.
That was mine then. And, we'd played a lot of golf over the winter when these guys weren't on tour. And, I was always trying to figure out what they were doing better than me. And because of that, I spent more time studying them than I did perhaps working on my own game. And I always blamed my lack of decent or good scores. I always felt I should be scoring best, but I always blamed that on my technique. But back on it all these years later, I know that it just my mind was all over the place. I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. I was more interested in what everyone else was doing. And I was an eye for how people went about their business. It wasn't just about how they swung the club, but how they kind of managed themselves and how they carried themselves on the golf course. Not just on the golf course, but kind of in general. And certainly I carried a little bit when I was at, I guess, my late teens for Andrew Oldcorn, mid-80s. And I kind of really started to observe what everybody else was doing and what all the guys were doing on the range, on the golf course, chipping greens, putting green, all the rest of it. So I guess I just got really interested from that, just from observing and being around it all the time.
Okay. And you mentioned Adam Hunter there. It was obviously we both knew, and it was a lovely guy. And he became a coach as well, didn't he? So in those younger days, did you both feel, I mean, he was no disrespect, but he was a very good player as well. And did you kind of have conversations about coaching or not?
Well, we did, because Adam was always keen to learn. I mean, while he had a tour card and everything, I was an assistant at Dalmahoy at the time. He used to come through to see my boss, who was one of the PGA tutors at the time. And he used to come through, and Adam was very keen to learn more about coaching because he felt it wouldn't just help him with his future if he ever stopped playing, but it helped him with his own game. He wanted to know why.
Yeah.
It was one for asking why. You'd explain something to me, yeah, but why? But why? Why? Why does that happen? What would have influence would that happen on this or whatever? He was very curious, I guess would be the word to use. And I guess and I just wanted to learn more and more about it. And still learning.
Yeah. And Karl, so from your point of view, obviously cricket, golf, different sports, obviously Gary's like playing football as well. How did you kind of get into the performance side of it really is, I suppose, what we'd call it, isn't it?
Yeah, it was definitely through my own failures, really. I mean, I had a go playing for a while and was spectacularly unsuccessful with that. But I look back now, and what we just said about I took up playing the game, and I think it was about 18 months after I'd first got a handicap. I shot level par in a local club competition, and I'd never actually had any lessons. I'd just kind of been out there and played golf, typical thing in the summer holidays. I'd be out there, I'd play 36 holes and then see if I could get another 9 in. And I just loved being on the golf course. And I remember I used to draw every shot, and I seemed to have reasonable control over the ball. And it seemed like the most natural thing in the world to just go out there and see shots and play them. And with this sort of little bit of success, people started saying, "Oh, you've done really well. If you had some lessons, you could be really good." And and then that was where, looking back, it really started to unravel, because I gripped it strong, probably rolled it a little bit, maybe a bit shut in the backswing, but could hit these shots. And the first couple of coaches that I worked with, straight away it was, "Oh, you've got to grip it like this, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that." And I look back on it now, and those early lessons, it was all about somebody's opinion that what I was doing was wrong based on how it looked. Because I would stand there in these lessons and hit pretty decent shots, still hit this lovely little draw that I'd got, and they would tell me I was doing loads of things wrong. And I look back on it now, and me and Gary have had many conversations about this, that the coaching that I received was never focused on the shots. It was always focused on the swing. And it was straight away, it was a sort of pass and fail model, whereby your technique, your swing, your movements don't stand up to the model that I've got in my mind, or the coach had got in his mind. And, I look back on that and I got so disconnected then. I'm quite inquisitive and analytical. And as they fed me information about the swing, I got even more involved in it and more sort of technical. And in the end, just couldn't play because I'd got so far away from playing shots. And I went from the kid who'd never been anywhere else but the golf course to just standing all day bashing balls on a range, which I look back now, it's akin to madness, really. But what happened? I mean, I turned pro and started to coach, and there was a kind of seminal moment. I was out in the States with a guy called Mike Hebron, and he asked me various questions about what I was doing with my coaching, and I realized that what I was doing with my coaching was exactly the things that people had done to me that made me a lot worse, in the sense that all I was doing was just passing on lots of technical information to people, thinking that how clever I was, that I knew all these fancy words and these fancy terms and all the rest of it. And I just got, again, disconnected as a coach from teaching shots and teaching people to actually play better golf as opposed to just swing it better. So I left the game for a couple of years, and I sort of searched around for lots of different approaches in terms of the mental side of the game, I suppose, in a game, and NLP and hypnosis and one thing and another. And I look back on it, it was those 2 years that were the most valuable to me, really, because I think if I hadn't stepped away from the game and gone away for it for a couple of years, I would never have seen the wood for the trees. It was when I stepped away from it that I thought, I'm just getting this completely wrong. And then I came back and started to focus more on the performance element of it, and worked with a couple of players who did okay. And, one thing led to another, and started working with some pretty good players, and sort of caught the train, really. It was the right time and the right place. Tiger Woods had just emerged, and there was talk about that he'd work with performance coaching, so I was very lucky in that respect, really.
Yeah. It's interesting you say about the coaching. You'd probably agree with this, Gary, but when Lenny was on the other day, he was saying, when he was a youngster playing at amateur golf, he used to have a bowed wrist.
Yeah.
And in those days, a bowed wrist was like, wasn't it? You should never have a bowed wrist. And look at it today almost. So it's funny, Karl, you say that, how it's gone kind of like a full circle, isn't it? And it's gone back to, I think the coaches are more coaching the player and working like you guys do with players, as opposed to, if it's not my way, you're on the highway kind of thing.
Right.
Well,
we're not big advocates of swing models. We're not absolutists. It's very much about, what comes, one of the questions we always ask is, does the swing create the shot, or does the shot create the swing?
Yeah.
And most people, the swing creates the shot. And then you ask them, okay, so if you're going to hit a low draw and a high fade, are you going to make the same swing to hit these shots? Well, obviously not. So, think about it then. It has to be about playing shots, because what you have to do in the golf course, you've got to play different shots.
Yeah.
A standard golf lesson, it's in a very sterile, stable environment. You've got a flat lie, you've got no wind conditions, you don't have any grass flying about behind the ball or under the ball, whatever it is. You're just trying to hit the same shot time after time after time, or are you? Or you're probably not. You just think about the same swing. Never mind, the shot doesn't even really come into it. It's all about position 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, about what you do with your body, how you move your body. Might be a little bit about how you move the club, but more often than not, the ball's a bit of an afterthought. So, you played at a high enough level to know that it's all about playing different shots. And when you play your best golf, you play a variety of different shots. You have to, but no one for too long. I think we all got kind of sucked into the technical complexities of the game. And I guess I went down that route for a while, but I've always tried to view the game of golf through the eyes of the player. So, I've worked with dozens of different players who all see the game slightly differently. So I've got to look at it through their lens rather than get them to look at it through mine. It's not about me. I'm not hitting the shots. I've got to adapt to how they see the game played, and then help them get better at what they do naturally, really. Because I think we've all seen it. We've all seen lots and lots of fantastic, really gifted players almost have that natural ability coached out of them.
Yeah.
Which is a crying shame, really. We could sit here and name dozens of players who we've witnessed that happen to.
Mm-hmm. So just sorry, go on.
Player, but yeah, they went down the wrong route.
Yeah. So just moving on, another kind of question to both of you, but just carrying on with you to start with, Gary, because the players that you've coached and the kind of people you've worked with and been around, have you got anybody who's like influenced the way you've thought? I mean, the person who you've worked with who comes to mind is the late Gordon Brand Jr. Now, you know, Gordy was just a tremendous person as well. And he was always willing to help other people. I mean, he was older than me, but I remember when I first went on tour, you know, he would take the mick out of people, but he would always be there. You know, you could ask him a question, see what he thought, but he had his own kind of theories. But I felt he was very, very knowledgeable.
Hugely knowledgeable, absolutely. And Gordon was a great student of the game. Gordon could tell you all sorts of things about the history of the game. Gordon was a very, very clever guy. He was a class clown. He was great to be around. I think that's probably the kindest way we could describe him, as the class clown. It was great fun. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Gordon over the years. And yeah, we had our differences of opinion from time to time, but he was always punctual. He was always polite. You always got to please. You always got to thank you. But I used to really pick his brains. You know, some of the things that Gordon had done in the game of golf, you know, when he was winning tournaments at his prime, you know, he wasn't just beating other tour pros. He was beating Langer. He was beating Seve, Faldo, Woosnam. You know, that was when these guys were at their prime. Gordon was still winning tournaments against these guys, with these guys in the field. You know, he played in 2 Ryder Cups in the mid-'80s when Europe were getting really, really strong. You know, I think 85 at the Belfry was the first time they'd won the Ryder Cup for God knows how long, and then they retained it in 87 at Muirfield Village. And I used to pick Gordon's brains all the time. Yeah, hugely knowledgeable. And yeah, he saw the game as he was a brilliant shot maker. You asked Gordon to hit a high 2-iron, a low 2-iron, a high wedge, a low wedge, a spinning wedge, knock the spin off it, hit it left to right, hit it right to left. Fantastic. A real shot maker, and someone who actually really enjoyed that element of the game. I think when the faster club heads came in and the faster golf ball that spun less, it kind of passed him by a little bit. He didn't get the benefit of that because he was never someone who stood up and absolutely hammered it. He was more creative, artistic. So he didn't really get the benefit of the modern technology. And I think that the game, he didn't really like the game as much, or didn't enjoy playing the game as much when it turned that way, when it was kind of dumbed down to a large degree. But yeah, hugely knowledgeable and very much, well, I'll tell you a little story. I've told this before and I don't mind telling it against myself. I made the mistake once, well, first started working with Gordon, he asked me, he said, we were at Glen Eagles, like an old Scottish Open. He said, right, Gary, can you, I said, how'd you play today, Gordon? I'll play shit. Didn't play good at all. Right, okay. Could you come and have a look in the range? Yeah, sure, love to, absolutely. Went down the range and he got 4 or 5 shots, beautiful, big, high, soft draws with a 6-iron. He said, well, what do you think? I said, well, it's good to me, Gordon. He said, well, it might do to you, but I'm trying to fade it. Oh, oops. So because I didn't ask him the question, what is it you're actually trying to achieve here? Big mistake. Mistake I have made since then. I always ask, what is your intention? What is it you're actually trying to do here? Before, because otherwise you just form an opinion based on what you see.
Yeah. Okay. So, Karl, going back to just mentioning some of the names that you've worked with, you've obviously worked with, you know, 3 of the biggest names in golf in the modern era, Darren Clarke, and who I know and played quite a bit of golf with when we both started out, and McDowell and Oosterhuizen. And prior to working with these guys, again, the same kind of question, where did your influence, did you have any influences, or was it all kind of your own ideas? But obviously you must have read and talked and listened, etc., to form these ideas.
Yeah, no, there was a whole bunch of influences, really, Jeremy. I think, you know, there's one name that stands out looking back is a guy called Chuck Hogan, who really never ever got the credit that he deserved for the stuff that he put together and put out. He was a coach in Arizona in the States, and he produced something back in the 80s called the Players Program. And I remember getting hold of that and getting in touch with him, and it just felt so different to me, because he was actually questioning some of the established sort of myths, as we know now, are myths of the game. You know, he'd question things like muscle memory and explain from neuroscience perspective, that's just nonsense, that your muscles don't have a memory. And the idea that, you can stand on a range and just try and repeat a movement over and over again like a robot, thinking that your muscles will stoke up these memories and then take them with you on the golf course, is just nonsensical, because every single golf swing starts in the brain. It's a communication from brain to body. So he really got me thinking about the whole thing, because my experience and seeing so many other players was, why do we have such a gap between what we see people doing on the range, what they do playing friendly golf, and then actually in a performance situation? And the more I looked at it, and the more with the influences of people like, you could see that you could disappear down the technical route, because always what happens is people would play well on the range, go to the golf course, not perform to that same level of capability or expectation. And then what do? They come back to the range to try and fix the problem. When, again, it's crazy that, my understanding is with it now is that, once you've developed these skills and your brain can react to a situation, be that with a cricket ball, a tennis ball, or football, or indeed a golf ball, that really what happens is, when you don't perform well, is that you don't lose those skills. You actually lose access to those skills. So there's something going on in your brain. And, an overly simplistic model is, if you think your brain's just made up a load of electrical currents, brainwave frequencies, that when we play our best golf, those brainwave frequencies are actually operating at a pretty low level. There's a calmness there. It's more sort of, beta waves, alpha waves. And then when you get in a situation where there's lots on your mind, or you're overly technical, or whatever it may be, those brain waves speed up, and it's kind of like, your access to your skills is kind of denied. But it's not going to be fixed just by focusing on technique. It's much more about, what do you do before the tournament starts? What do you do at the start of the day? What do you do, indeed? Me and Gary have talked so much about this, the critical element. What do you do before you actually step into the shot? And these things are not really looked at enough, because, still to this day, when somebody hits a bad shot on TV, what happens is there's an expert in the booth, there's an expert on the panel there, and they say, well, why did Tiger hit it left? And we get Tiger's swing up, and we say, well, he's hit it left because he's got trapped on the inside, or he's flipped his hands, or whatever nonsensical story that they come up with. And we don't actually track it back and think, well, he's maybe flared it straight right on this hole because he knocked it in the water 2 days running on Thursday and Friday, and his brain's responding to that environment, and his brain's got busy, and he's overcorrected. So, the simplistic notion that when you're struggling, it's always down to technique. Both Gary and myself would never say that technique isn't an element of this. Of course it is, but it's not the whole story. And I think we just need to be a bit smarter in future, and just looking at the whole picture rather than just an isolated element of it.
Mm. And so when you started working with Darren and Louis Osterhazen and McDowell, was there any kind of common denominators between these top players that you thought, yeah, this is how I could kind of help them? Or are they all different individual cases? I mean, you didn't go into too much detail, but is there any common denominator there?
None at all. I mean, no, they're all just, and that's the other thing that I found, that, everybody is an obvious thing to say, but a unique individual. So, back to what Gary said before about having models, that's the limitation of models. My big thing when I'm working with anybody, first and foremost, is to really not say an awful lot for the first meeting. It's just what primarily I think we as coaches, we should, number one, we should actually see people play the sport in the environment that they're going to play. They're going to play the tournaments. How crazy is it that we have a coaching model that's built around the premise that you try and fix somebody's game without seeing them play? I mean, you think about that. Can you imagine a football manager or a cricket coach saying, well, I'm not going to come and watch any of the matches, but you come in on Monday morning and tell me how you've played, and I'll give you some ideas what to work on? It would be ludicrous to think that would happen, but that's the existing coaching model as it is with golf. So I think getting, I know Gary spends a lot of time with his players out on the course, and getting out there and seeing what is actually going on in the environment, that unique environment called golf course. How do they respond to, water on the left? How do they respond to, out of bounds on the right, or playing in windy conditions, or whatever it may be? What is the process of creating shots? So, back to the question that you asked, it really is about finding out about that unique individual, finding out what they want to do, and then trying to create some bridge to help them move in the direction that they believe they want to go.
So this kind of goes to both of you now. It's like one of the key words or key phrases these days is creating pressure for when you're practicing. And obviously for a young guy, if he's starting off, he can't afford to have his coach and his performance coach go to tournaments. Tiger Woods, I mean, he goes on in my team and this, well, he can afford a team that big, but not everybody can afford that. So, you obviously, when you, with your guys, when they come to Archerfield or wherever, you're obviously trying to create a bit of a pressure situation while they're practicing, so you can see what's going on, water left, water right, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually, Karl and I have talked about this an awful lot in the last few years. We don't actually like the term practicing when you're working on your game. We like to think of it more about training. So if you played football during the week, you'd have football training. If you played rugby during the week, you'd have rugby training. If you played cricket, you'd go cricket training. But golf is about practice. We like to think about training for the tournament you're going to play in. Excuse me. For example, before I joined you guys this morning, I've just been out for 9 holes with young Grant Forrest on the course this morning. We went out about 7:45 this morning. He's off to Spain to play in a couple of tournaments in the European Tour next week. Leaves on Sunday. And it was really about, okay, so I don't work with him on his golf swing. He works with someone else on his golf swing, but work with him more on the kind of performance aspects and more short game and putting. And it was really, I was out there this morning just to ask him, when he's standing over each and every shot, I'd ask him the question, what is the shot here? And then I'd get him to verbalize what he was doing. So, and I asked him, do you find it helpful to actually talk me through the shot you're going to play? He said, absolutely. I get a much clearer picture, and it reinforces the visualization of what I see in my mind's eye. If I then verbalize it, then that just strengthens the image. So we decided that, when he won in last year up at the Fairmont at St Andrews, he won the Hero Open. It was all about hitting shots. What is the shot here? What is the shot here? And his caddy got really involved. So we were just chatting this morning on the way around, saying, okay, would it be an idea to get John involved again in part of your pre-shot routine, and that triggers your process, which is getting John to ask you the question, okay, what is the shot here, Grant? And it's not, the shot isn't a 9-iron or a 7-iron. That's the club. That's something entirely. So do you see it word coming in from the left? Is it flighted down? Is it flighted up? Is it a back flag? Whatever. Just so he got a much clearer picture of the shot he wanted to hit, trust his technique, and then just play. Because he plays, as we all do, we all play our best when we're just playing golf. And we're not trying to fix something in our golf swing or pay attention to what we're doing in the backswing or what your left knee, your right nostril or left ear. And we've all fallen into that trap, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You remove these shackles and just get them out playing golf again. It's amazing what can happen.
Yeah, okay, all right. Going back to you, Karl. So these days you see a lot of things when the pros, especially the young guys, there's a lot of things written on people's golf gloves. Going back to the Open when Oosterhuizen won, there was a little red dot on the glove, wasn't there? Yeah. And that kind of seemed to set a trend, and you see all sorts of crazy things written now. So can you enlighten us on what that little red dot meant?
Yeah, I dread to think some of the things that are written on the gloves these days, Jeremy.
I think some of them, Karl, they're medium gloves, but they get extra large so they can get it all written on.
Yeah, it's almost like the Formula One drivers with all the sort of different advertising on there. And it's the same with the gloves. You know somebody's taking this the wrong way when they've not got enough glove to fit all the messages on there. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny, really. I've often said about when people ask me about Louis and the red glove, never assume really with players, because Chubby Chandler introduced us together, and he just played in the US Open previous to the meeting, and we sat down, and I'd kind of assumed he'd maybe done a lot of work on this side of the game, and really hadn't. I mean, there he was with this magnificent golf swing and great player and great shot maker, but he'd never actually made a cut in a major up to that point. And we talked about the idea of focus and concentration and being in the right place to be absorbed in the shot. And I'll never forget, he said he played in the US Open, and he said there were so many shots that he'd actually hit the shot, and then as he was walking away after the shot, just thought to himself, where the hell was I? You know, I wasn't absorbed, I wasn't involved in that shot, I was just somewhere else in my mind. And I said, well, where were you in between shots? And he looked at me, he said, oh, I was concentrating then. You know, and it was kind of like bingo moment, really, that, you know, and I talked to him about allocating concentration, whereby the idea that you could be in an intense state of focus and concentration for 5 hours in a round of golf is just nonsense. But really what the skill is to be able to switch into the shot or click into the shot and then be able to come out of that. So we just came up with a few thoughts around, you know, I think I asked him what word would he describe if he was in the right place over a shot. And I think it was focus or something like that. And I said, well, if focus had a color, what would it be? And he looked at me as it was the daftest question ever. And I said, go on, just what would it be? And he said, red, I guess. And true as I'm sat here, it was one of those serendipitous moments. There was actually a red marker on the desk that we sat in Chubby's office in Manchester, and he had his glove with him. And he said, what? He said, do you mean if I maybe had a dot on my glove that could actually trigger me to go into that shot and create a state of focus constraint? He got his glove out and he drew the dot on his glove. So it was far more his idea than mine, really. But basically, what the dot was all about was just a trigger to let his brain know that whatever's happened in the past has happened, whatever's going to happen in the future is going to happen. But right now, at this moment, when I see that dot, it's very much about becoming absorbed in the challenge that this particular shot in this unique moment in time is presenting to me, tuning into the golf course. So the dot really was just a trigger to ask a couple of questions in his routine and get absorbed in the shot. You know, and he went to, I think he played in Scottish Open. I'm not sure he even made the cut, but he said he started to feel better about it, and then went to St Andrews. I think he shot 64 in the first round at St Andrews. A few people were saying, oh, it's nice that a young player's, you know, leading the Open. There's no way he can hang on for 4 rounds. He hasn't got the experience to win a major. But the deal was for the whole week that was going to be his process. Look at the dot, ask a couple of questions, get absorbed in the shot. His caddy Zach was brilliant that week because we talked about the idea of going into the shot and then coming out. So, you know, he talked about all kinds of bullshit in between shots, and they had a you know, they were smiling away and sort of and really distracting him in a very positive way in between shots, and then he'd come back into it, you know, and 3 days later, after that opening round, he stood on the final hole at St Andrews with a 7-shot lead. And, you know, as you know, Jeremy, if there's ever anywhere where you wouldn't mind a 7-shot lead, it would be stood on that final tee there at St Andrews with a bit of room on the left-hand side. And, you know, he went on and obviously won the Open. But, you know, was it all down to the red dot? No, but that was just a way of quietening his mind, like I talked about before. The brainwave frequencies would have died down. And that allowed him that week to access the skills that were already there. He'd done great work with Pete Cowan and other coaches. It was all there in place, but he wasn't able to access it until the mind just became a little bit quieter. But as you say, that dot, Gary's heard me tell this story too many times, but I remember it got a bit of press, and a good few weeks later, I think it was a pro-am or something like that, and I saw a guy on one of the tees there with the red dot on his glove, and I went up to him. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. You've got a red dot on your glove." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I've no idea what it's all about." He said, "But I thought I'd give it a go anyway."
Yeah, well, I could quite easily believe it. It might have done him some good. You never know. It might have made him concentrate. You just never know. So great feelings when the guys won the majors, Karl, and any specific kind of memories of things that happened in the last round when the pressure was on? I mean, you speak there about Louis being 7 shots ahead, but even with that many shots ahead, there's still I would imagine, a vast amount of pressure on these guys in the last round.
Yeah, I'm sure Gary would agree with this, that when you're working with a player, it's far, far worse watching it than actually being in there, being in there playing. I mean, I remember that final round, even though, you know, he's 6-7 shots in the lead. Most of that final round, I watched from behind the settee rather than sitting in front of it. I remember, you know, stood on 17. This is probably why I was no good as a player. I'm still thinking on 17, how many could he take here if he knocked 3 out of bounds on the right hand side or whatever? And you know, and yeah, it is. And on a serious note, I mean, I've tried to catch myself in the last few years, really, and I know Gary's the same. That what I fell into the trap of with players was in a way getting too attached to the outcomes, in the sense that if a player didn't do really well, I'd really think it was my fault, and you know, I hadn't done the best for them and whatever. And when they did win, I probably got a bit carried away about how much part of that I'd played. And I really try and have a rule now that yeah, I've done my best to help somebody, but ultimately, when a player plays well, it's they are hitting all the shots. You know, they're doing the job. They are actually out there. So when a player does well, I think a coach needs to be careful to take too much credit. But on the other hand as well, you know, when a player doesn't do too well, if you've done the best that you believe you can, you know, that's not your fault either. If somebody misses a cut or you know, doesn't close out a tournament or whatever. So I think becoming too emotionally attached to the outcome in terms of a player, I think you've got to develop a bit of equanimity really with it, and just keep asking yourself, are you doing the best that you possibly can? And if you can honestly say yes to that, well, you know, that's your part of the bargain, really.
I mean, I do agree with you. It's a lot worse watching than it is playing.
Oh, terrible. No
doubt about it. But just moving on from that, I mean, obviously we look after some young golfers. That I've got a son who's trying to make it. If you see something on the course, whether it be on TV or whether you're watching them live, surely you've got to say something to them post round or post tournament on a bit of a debrief and say, this is what you think happened during that situation that created something to go wrong. You know, they might lose a pre-shot routine or something like that, for example.
Yeah, I think that again, you know, the light-hearted bit out of the way, that is the really valuable part of being able to watch players, to actually see what's going on. If you can see them on TV, or if you happen to be there at the tournament, just to see what's going on down the final 9 holes, what happened on you know, on 17 when they managed to 3-putt or whatever. And generally it'll be that they will have got out of sequence in some way. You know, golf is from start to finish, golf is a game of sequence and organizing your sequence. You know, you'll know, Jeremy, when you've played your best golf, the sequence in your golf swing seems to flow effortlessly, doesn't it? You know, the change from backswing to downswing, it seems like you've got a little bit more time. Your sequence is working for you. And I think we don't look enough what gets us out of that sequence when we're not playing really well. And you know, Sunday, Saturday afternoon, or whatever, that sequence can change, but with things like the way somebody walks in between shots. Do they start walking quicker? Do they start walking slower? The breathing patterns, things like that. So rather than just blaming that, my rhythm's gone in my swing, or I'm getting snatchy at the top, just go a little bit further under the surface than that, because you could feel as though your rhythm was off and just go and work on your rhythm, but that's not answering why did your rhythm change. What was it that caused that sequence to get out? And then, you know, when you can start to understand, it may well be something in the pre-shot routine.
So just moving on from that, Karl, presumably, you know, if you're at a tournament or you're watching the guys on TV, and you see something that is clearly they've kind of got out of a pre-shot routine or something like that that's caused an error, in a kind of debrief afterwards, sure, you know, presumably you'd be telling them this is what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a really valuable thing to watch those final holes on TV, or if you're at the tournament. And usually what happens is that a player will get out of sequence as the brain activity revs up. You know, they'll what we know, and you'll have experienced this when you've played your best golf. good golf is all about a sequence. That the transition from backswing to downswing feels nice and smooth. You feel like you've got more time in your swing. And when we're off, we often feel that there's no sort of blend between backswing and downswing. It all feels rushed, and it's the easiest thing in the world to just try and work on the rhythm. But actually, the deeper question underneath the surface is what changed that sequence. What threw you out? Was it something in your pre-shot routine? Was it something in the way that you were walking in between shots? Often players will start walking either more slowly or they'll walk quicker in between shots. But probably the area that most of the guys that you work with and aspiring tournament professionals and top amateurs and certainly people on the tour trying to win for the first time, probably the biggest area that they could look at that they would get the best return is have a deeper understanding of what they do after the shot has gone. How do they react to what's just happened? Do they have a way of dampening down that emotional reaction to the inevitable poor shots that come along as you play a round of golf? The brain doesn't like to be shocked. And if you suddenly miss a short putt, it's a big predictor of what's going to happen if somebody misses a short putt, and the reaction to that can then lead to drop shot after drop shot, and the tournament goes as a result of that. So again, it's looking a bit more underneath the surface of this, beneath the surface of it, at areas that we probably don't ordinarily look at, and not just trying to fix the symptoms. The quicker swing, the faster change from backswing to downswing is understanding what changed in you that actually created that alteration in the flow of your swing.
Right. Okay. I just want to get on. I want to get on to the lost art of the books that you guys have written together. But just very quickly, Karl, you obviously worked with other sports, with top level athletes in other sports. How did you get into that, just briefly? And is it the same kind of theories, really?
Yeah, I mentioned cricket at the beginning, Jeremy, and probably the highlight of my working life was being asked to work with Michael Vaughan during the 2005 Ashes series, which went down. It's allegedly the greatest Test series of all time. And got asked to work with him through that series. The late great Shane Warne was in his pomp at that time, and probably one of the best Australian teams that has ever come over to these shores. Ponting and Langer and Hayden and players like that. But we had Flintoff and Harmison and Jones, and it was a magnificent series. But working with Vaughan all the way through that series, there were so many parallels that he resonated with from the game of golf. Especially as a batsman, there's huge intervals, isn't there? You receive a ball, and then there's an activity, the ball goes to the boundary, or you just play defensively, whatever, and then there's a gap between that ball and the next ball. And we talked a lot about where the mind needs to be in that particular time. But again, a bit like Louis, we worked on some triggers that once the bowler had started to walk down to his mark, what was Vaughan going to do in his mind to actually trigger back into being present for this particular moment in time. And we talked a lot about, it sounds an obvious thing to say in cricket, but all the top players will say that when they're batting at the best, they're really just tuned into the ball, they're watching the ball. It sounds an obvious thing to do, but when your mind's full of nonsense, it's hard to do that. And we talked a lot in that series about playing the ball, not the man. So it was a ball coming down at you. It wasn't Shane Warne bowling at you or Glenn McGrath or whatever. And of course, as great as those bowlers were, they still took loads of wickets. But some of those ideas really resonated with Vaughan, and he was kind enough to say it had helped during that series. So I look back on those days with immense fondness. But I've worked with a number of goalkeepers in the Premiership, and that seems to be a similar tie-in with golf. That when you're a goalkeeper, a lot of the time you're not actually involved in the game, and then all of a sudden there's a split-second moment in time where you need to be tuned into and reacting to a corner or a shot or whatever. So I think the sportsmen and women I've worked with from other sports, that the link always is golf, really, that they see something in the game of golf that they feel maybe can be helpful to their own sport. And And obviously, when Tiger was dominating the world of golf in the way that he was, a lot of people from other sports were fascinated at some of the things that he'd worked on to improve his mental skills.
So the common denominator really in those three sports you kind of mentioned, in golf, being a batsman, and interestingly enough, a goalkeeper, never really thought about it, it's kind of like downtime during the game or the match, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, especially as a goalkeeper and very much as a batsman, what do you do when you've made a mistake? You know, as a goalkeeper, one of the most dangerous things to do, and it's a bit like trying to make up for a missed putt. One of the most dangerous things that you can do as a goalkeeper is try and make up for a mistake, so that you know all of a sudden you've dropped across and they've scored, and then 10 minutes later you come charging out of your area in a reckless tackle, and there's a penalty results, and that really has happened because you're still living in the mistake that happened 10 minutes ago. So being able to put that to bed in the same way that a golfer would need to deal with and accept the 3-putt or the bogey on par 3 or whatever it may be. So many parallels that crossed over. For a batsman in cricket, you've just played an awful shot. What are you going to do about that? How do you deal with that? And again, very often the bowler will get the batsman out, not because of the ball that he sends down, but the previous bad shot that the batsman played, and he's still living that, he's still thinking about that, and then plays a crazy shot. You see it time and time again in cricket, don't you? How many players get out, not as a result of a great ball, but as a result of a really poor decision.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, very interesting. That is really. So I never really thought about the goalkeeping side, but there you go. So moving on then, Gary, if you want to kind of take the lead on this. So obviously you guys having listening to you now, you've got very similar thoughts on the coaching side of golf. So how did the books kind of, they flowed pretty quickly, haven't they?
Yeah, we wrote 3 books in less than 4 years together. So that was quite, a bit of a surprise to write as many as quickly as that, to be perfectly honest. Karl and I have kind of known each other for quite a long time. There have been times in both our careers over the last 25 years when we've worked with the same player at the same time, but just in geographically different places. So we're very aware of each other. And then I think it's through Mike Vaughan, from Trackman, I do quite a lot of educational seminars for Trackman owners and users, and Mike thought it'd be a good idea to invite Karl along to speak at one of these up at Archfield. So he came along and we got chatting, and as you said, we think and see the game, think about and see the game very, very similarly. Lots of similar ideas, but looking at it from slightly different angles and through slightly different lenses. So we got together and we actually started doing some putting schools and clinics up here at Archfield, and we were getting some pretty incredible success with a variety of kind of skill level players, and it was all incredibly non-technical. And we'd been working together for quite a while, and we thought, this is really quite good. We're getting some really amazing results. We better write this shit down before we forget it. So we started taking notes, and we produced these little cards with the putting 6 putting performance principles, and then we talked about writing a book, and then we didn't know really what it was going to be about. It was obviously going to be golf related, but then it's almost like the putting book found us rather than us finding it or writing it. And yeah, we did that one, and it seemed to be quite well received, very well received, quite successful, and getting messages from people from all around the world. And then we thought, right, okay, there's maybe something in this. So we did the Lost Art of Playing Golf. Seemed like a natural progression, and again that was very well received, quite successful, and lots of great feedback. And we thought, okay, got to finish off the trilogy. The only thing that's been missing really is the short game, so we did that, and we finished that one. When did we finish that? October last year. So the first one was released in July 18 and the third in October 21. So yeah, we managed to churn out 3 books pretty rapid fashion, really, and we're very proud of done them. Very proud of what we've done with them. And if they help people, they're very non-technical. They're we'd like to think they're probably the most non-technical golf instruction, if you want to call them instruction books. They're kind of as well as, not instead of, instruction coaching books, if you like. They're guides.
Yeah.
We ask lots of questions. We try to get people to come up with their own answers, because no one really likes being told what to do they? Let's face it. But it can help people ask better questions, come up with better answers as a result of that, which we think we've done in the books. Then we've done our job.
Yeah.
And it's been a great collaboration. It's been really, really enjoyable doing them. But we're not going to be, we discussed this, haven't we, Karl? There's not going to be like the Rocky series, not going to be 4, 5, 6. Much more to say.
To extend the cricketing talk, we've declared the innings now, Jeremy, on that. There's no more. There's no more runs.
But just going back a little bit, Karl, you've obviously written the book with Darren Clark, didn't you? Previously. So these kind of books are different books altogether.
Yeah, I'd like to think that the book that we wrote with Darren, that was 2005. It's a pity we didn't write it in 2010, really, just before he won the Open. It'd probably sold a few more if we'd done it that way. But I look back at that book, and it was what I was thinking at the time, and the approach I was using at the time. Things hopefully have moved on. I think if you write the same book that you wrote in 2005, if you write the same book 10, 15 years later, something's gone wrong. Really, you've not evolved as a coach. So there's quite a different approach really in the Lost Art books. And as Gary said, we primarily we get people to ask a few more questions of themselves. Things. What a seemingly obvious question. Things like, why do you play the game? Which sounds the most ridiculously simple question to ask. But actually, we believe that question, if you don't ask it and you don't think about it deeply, and you don't take the first couple of answers that pop out of your head, if you can start to get a bit more of a connection of why the hell are you doing this? What is it all about? What's the real purpose of you playing this game? And then one of the contributors, a chap called Vin Harris, who Gary and hosted a great 2 days that we just had up at Archerfield. We did a mindfulness retreat with Vin and myself. And Vin's got a great line, and he says that you need to get clear about why you play the game, but then the most important thing is think about why you play golf when you play golf. Because what a lot of people do, you'll get one guy say, I love the social side of the game, that's why I play. And then he'll go and play on a Saturday afternoon, and he has a 3-putt on the 4th, and then don't speak to anybody for another 2 hours. So he's kind of like lost connection with his purpose. And so I think questions like that, because what is one of the big myths really about the game is, the big myth is that I'll be happy when I play well. Well, we kind of explore the idea that to play well, it's the other way around. That if you're feeling content about a lot of things, and you're grateful for the opportunity, the incredible opportunity that this next round of golf presents to you, because we all labor under a supreme arrogance that we think there's going to be more than the next round. And you look at what's going on in the world now, and Gary's just mentioned 2 people in this podcast that sadly are no longer with us, Adam Hunter and Gordon.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, every one of us has a finite number of rounds left in us. Fortunately, we don't know how many that is, but there's a real arrogance if we think it's going to go on forever. And I think we all fall into the trap of playing the game today for something that we think it might give us at some point in the future. And yes, it's great to have directions and goals and ambitions. That's an essential part of this, especially for the guys that you work with. But I firmly believe that it's very unlikely that you'll achieve a lot of those things that you think that you want in the future if you're very detached from your experience that you've got today. And that today might just be you playing a few holes on your home course on your own today. But it's very easy to think that round is all about some time in the future, when you've really got to develop the skill of being incredibly grateful for this opportunity today in its own right. But the more you can do that, the more actually I think you get into states of mind that facilitate great play, that at some point in the future you're able to release your true capability, not because you hope that that day will make you happy. You're actually more in that state of mind before you even start to play the game on that day.
No, I totally agree with you. Someone once said to me that, the future's never written, you create it.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely true in my, I always think that, no one writes the future, do they?
No, but you look at what's going on in the world currently, and you just, those poor people in Ukraine, and you just think, my God, 6-8 weeks ago, they would have all been doing what we're doing. They'll have been going to work and training in a gym and playing tennis and football and going to a restaurant, and that would have been normal life. And then what's happened, and we said, well, that can't happen in Europe, but it has. And without this being all about doom and gloom, there's actually a real upside to it. That and Gary may want to comment on this. The number of people that in the second book we talked a lot about the concept of gratitude. Many people might recall and think, that's all fluffy hippie nonsense. But the number of people who said that when they really embraced those ideas, it actually allowed them to play some of the best golf of their entire life. But that was actually playing the good golf was actually secondary to the understanding of the gratitude in the first place.
Yeah. On from that, we kind of wrestled with the idea, should we include a couple of pages or a couple of paragraphs about gratitude, never mind a chapter. And we thought, no, we'll be brave, we'll throw it in there. And, it might not be what anyone picking up the book would expect to read. And we put it right at the very start of it. And have to say that it's probably the chapter that from the second book that has provided the most positive feedback. It's the thing that most people really it hits them right between the eyes. They go, wow, yeah, wasn't expecting that. And it's something that they are now very, very much aware of, but something they were kind of blissfully unaware of in the past. But as soon as you see gratitude for what it is, as Karl often talks about, it's not gratitude with strings. I'll be grateful when I hit good shots. I'll only be grateful when I hit good shots. We've all got lots of amazing things to be grateful for before we even think about getting on the golf course. Yeah, it's certainly something that we are very aware of. And the longer you live, the more things we have got to be grateful for, because we do, again, as Karl says, labour under the crazy illusion that there's going to be a 1,000 more tomorrows. Yeah. You just don't know. So appreciate what you have today, and it's amazing that it actually leads to a very, very powerful performance environment and state.
Right, so these next few questions are kind of direct, not quick fire questions, but a few quick fire answers to finish off with. So, Gary, you've obviously certified Trackman master for 10 years and an expert Trackman. In your opinion, and you're obviously going to say yes, it is, but in your opinion, has all the Trackman and all the technology that's come into the game, certainly in the last 5 years, I would say, in your opinion, has it been good for the game of golf, not just for professionals, but for amateurs as well?
I think Trackman itself has been fantastic for the game. I think the issue with Trackman, I hear a story, Trackman ruined so-and-so, Trackman ruined so. Trackman never ruined anyone. No bit of technology you ever used has ruined anyone. The person operating the Trackman is the one to blame.
Right.
The Trackman numbers are just numbers. It's a measuring device. And if you can measure rather than guess, then I'm all for that. But you've got to be careful how you use it. You shouldn't really be able to use a Trackman until you pass your test, I think. You shouldn't be able to jump on a car just because you're old enough and you can afford one. You shouldn't just be allowed to drive a car because you can.
Yeah.
Trackman exactly the same. It's very difficult to make someone say, you spent X amount of money on a launch monitor, but you can't use it yet until you've actually passed your test. But I think that'd be a great way to do it, because, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. I did my certifications because I wanted to know inside out, because I didn't want to be able to be tripped up or trip myself up. So yeah, I think technology used correctly, used cleverly, can be hugely beneficial. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great parallel between almost driving a car, and you wouldn't get in the car and just drive down the motorway just because you say you've got a car. And
No,
I've seen people with Trackman. I mean, I don't understand it properly, but I've never looked into it in the detail you have. But clearly, some people use Trackman and they really don't use it to the benefit. You know, they're kind of driving the wrong way, aren't they?
yeah. It took me a while to understand that, but it's only through using that you get better at it. But again, by education, you just get a much greater in-depth knowledge. You know, I've been out to Trackman, I've been out to Copenhagen, went about 3 or 4 years ago as a crowd of us went out there. About 10 or 12 of us were invited from around the world for a 3-day seminar, and it was fantastic. I mean, the guy who invented it is literally a rocket scientist. You know, before he worked for Trackman, he designed missile tracking radar devices for the Danish government. If you can track, I think a Pro V1 should be too much for this.
All right, so that's one. Going on to you, Karl. This question is meant to be in a good way. Who would you say, and don't answer it if you don't want, but who would you say is the most ungifted kind of player you've worked with who's gone on to great success? Because obviously over the years in all sports, and Gary would have seen it, I've seen it in golf, and there's been loads of young golfers that I grew up with who've achieved nothing but looked world beaters, and then there's other people who you think, oh, he's not that good, and they go on to be Ryder Cup players. I mean, I'm not mentioning any names, so you don't have to if you don't want, but the most ungifted player who's gone on to great success.
Yeah, as you can imagine, Jeremy, I'm going to dodge that bullet rather than name anybody. I mean, I was listening to, there was a podcast I was listening to recently, Hal Sutton's podcast, and he had Jim Furyk on there, which, you know, we all quote Jim Furyk's swing when we want to talk about unorthodox, don't we, or a golf swing that doesn't look particularly pretty. But it was just a fascinating interview with Furyk, you know, guy who's won whatever it's $70 million, whatever the hell it is, thousands and hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars, and lots of tournaments, shot 58 and 59. But it was interesting, you know, relating it to technology, that he said that he's obviously been coached by his father all his life. He said they would kind of have a look on video now and again. He said he does use Trackman now and again, but that's very much related to the shots that he's trying to play. He just uses it as a kind of backup. And interesting what he did mention, that he talked about the idea that using Trackman efficiently was more about how did that particular swing feel to him, and then did Trackman match up what his feeling was, rather than, I think a lot of young players make the mistake that they hit a shot and then immediately they look at Trackman to tell them what happened in the swing. Well, that's the worst thing that you can do. You should be feeling things in your swing. Can you feel the path to the right or the path to the left, or where the face is pointing? And then just see if the Trackman says that your feeling is matching up to a reality. But what Furyk said was that, he said, this was, I thought was really interesting. He said he felt that he'd never played a single round in his entire career where he was committed to every shot. And he said that was his number one goal, was to, on every single shot, try and be really clear about the shot he was trying to play, have a clear intention and a feel for that particular swing, and then just get in there and play it. But he said, you know, I've never achieved perfection in that. But he said he spent far more of his time thinking about and focusing on what he did before the shot, rather than obsessing about what he did during the swing, which I thought was really enlightening. And you know, and you look at his golf swing and you think, what a brave coaching scenario that was with his father, that, you know, his son's got this unorthodox looking move, but he was strong enough in his mind, and he's strong enough in his belief to think, well, it might look a bit funny, but my goodness, it's effective. And it's the difference between skill and style. You know, we could argue that Furyk hasn't got a great style, but he's got immense skill.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's, I suppose, really, probably I just phrased the question slightly wrong. There's a couple of people I know, and again, I wouldn't mention them, but some people actually like to be thought of as an overachiever. You know, and I think people, and there are people who, in the game of golf, in all sports, who are big overachievers, and it's quite a credit to someone that they do become overachievers, because clearly they've done immense amount of hard work, practice, and done loads of good stuff to be an overachiever.
Well, I think Boycott, that we started the whole session with, you know, Jeff Boycott, the cricketer. I mean, we actually wrote a book called Mentality, and guy who wrote it with, a guy called Joe Sillett, who used to work in cricket, interviewed Jeff Boycott, and he said he was very proud the fact that he had overachieved from what he'd got ability wise. He just worked at finding the best way for him to be the best version of a batsman that he could possibly be.
Yeah.
Just a good job he played in the 60s and 70s rather than playing in the current day with 2020 and the 100.
Yeah. Gary, going kind of one for you, really, just a quick one. Who's you might not want to say, but obviously some players are a bit more technical than the others. Any kind of player who stands out, who like to be very technical? I mean, one of my pals, you didn't coach him, but you remember Roger Winchester. Rog used to get properly technical.
Oh, we did. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There have been one or two over the years. And I guess I can do the technical stuff, but I always try to, excuse me, but try and flip it on its head a little bit, and by asking, what, as I mentioned earlier on, I made the mistake of not asking Gordon what kind of shot he wanted to hit. So I learned very quickly that was a question that needed to be asked. So rather than, as soon as we got them thinking about shots rather than swings, it's amazing how the paradox is that the better the shot becomes, the brain and body or the better the clarity of intention for that shot becomes, the brain and body will then start to figure out the right moves anyway. But it's, I mean, oh God, I don't think I couldn't narrow it down to 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 even. There's so many and I was guilty of it myself. If it didn't way my swing looked. I mean, there were certain one player in particular who'd hated a move that he made in his backswing, and he felt he couldn't play if he got the club a little too inside, a little too shut earlier on, and he wanted to see what it looked like. So what I used to do to tell him this, I still haven't told him, I've worked with him for a number of years. He won a couple of times on tour when I worked with him. But what I used to do was stand at a slightly different angle with the camera. So it didn't like it was coming inside, it didn't look like it was shut. So as soon as he saw the position he wanted to see, it freed him up to play great golf. But had I shown him the real image, you'd have missed cut after cut after cut. So for me, it was all about trying to drag them away from the technicalities of it. Some needed a little bit of technical help for sure, but you know what it's like. You've got to be a decent player to go out on tour in the first place.
Yeah.
No one playing shit golf has a tour card for very long, that's for sure. So just kind of, you'd find tricks of helping people become less technical and more about get more into playing the game. Because, why do we all play the game? Because we love it initially. That's why we started to play for sure. But when you start playing this for that, as Karl talks about, it's a different game.
So just kind of finish. I've got a couple more questions. First one from me. If to both of you, this is really, or if you were looking at a young 16-year-old kid and 17, whatever kind of age, and they said to you, what would be your main piece of advice to me? And let's say they've got a fairly solid swing or +2 handicap or whatever. What would you kind of say to them? I know it's all individual, but just as a kind of a bit of help really to somebody who might be listening, who might be 16 or 17 and think, that'd be good. I'll take that on board. What would you kind of say to them?
Do you want me to go first?
Go? Yeah, you go, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would rather than tell them anything, I'd ask them a lot of questions. I think the best advice is not to. I don't believe in giving instruction. I think that's a terrible way to. As golf coaches, it's always been about telling the player to do this, telling the player to do that. And I think for way too long, I mean, I was guilty of this for a while as well. We don't ask enough questions of the player. I always say anyone, for the first time they come in to see me, I'll explain to them that I will probably have more questions for them than they will have for me. Because without me understanding what they're trying to do, why they're trying to do it, how they're trying to do it, then all I'm going to do is form an opinion based on what I may have perceived as a model golf swing or a model golf shot. But without knowing anything about the person, the personality, what their intention is for not just the shot, but for where they want to go in the game, why they want to do that, find someone who you can actually dig a little deeper with, rather than just go straight into the technical aspect of it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything to add, Karl?
Yeah, I think kind of backing up what Gary's saying there, my number one thing would be limit the input. I think at the moment we've just got so much information flying around. There's so much available on YouTube and podcasts, and I have a podcast myself. I think certainly for a young player coming up, just Hal Sutton's got a great phrase. He talks about shrinking the world. Shrink your world down. Don't keep adding more and more stuff to it and more input. And I think that's where there's a real value in the likes of what you're doing, Jeremy, is having not so much loads of coaches, but mentors, people who've kind of been where somebody wants to go to, and they can see the danger of too much information and too much input. And at the end of the day, if somebody can follow some key principles and spend perhaps a bit more time working on shots rather than swings, and spend a bit more time understanding themselves as a unique individual rather than just thinking it's all about input from other people all of the time, that would be a big strong message for me. If I work with somebody that I think I've done a reasonably good job with them, if I can shrink their world a little bit and just get them to really understand a bit more about themselves as an individual, but also get them to understand the importance of what they put their attention on. It's a real skill to be able to put your attention in just a few key areas that allow your capabilities to come out, rather than overloading it with lots of promises of the latest craze in terms of new information.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that. So it's really going back to the individual then from both of you, finding out about the individual person.
Has to be.
Yeah.
Has to be.
So moving on from that. So my last guest on here was someone we all know, Steve Richardson. And so Steve has come up with a question for the both of you, but I think I know the answer to this now, I haven't heard of you. Steve wanted to know whether if you two took a 7-year-old kid and you coached him 24 hours a day or was with him all the time, could you make him into a great tour player? Well, I think the answer is probably no. You'd have to ask, the individual has to lead himself, does he?
I think the worst thing you could possibly do is spend a lot of time with him.
Yeah.
I think they need to learn how to self-manage, to self-organize. I'm not saying that a 7-year-old can do that straight away, obviously. But yeah, I think what you'd have to do is let them go and play. Let them learn to play golf, or by playing to learn, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Where you play golf, J-Rob, you played the golf course, right? That's when you learned how to play golf. We all learned how to play golf on golf courses. Kids nowadays, I'm not sure they learn how to play golf on golf courses. They learn how to play on driving ranges. They learn how to hit the ball and how to swing a golf club on a driving range. Yet they can't transfer that skill directly onto the golf course because it's a completely different environment. So, yeah, I'm not a big one on over-coaching.
No.
I think the big difference between coaching and learning. And I think they have much more on learning.
So
I couldn't think of anything worse than spending every day with me as a 7-year-old. I couldn't imagine there'd be a bigger guarantee of failure. Yeah, spend a few days a year with me, but not every day. That's for sure.
Yeah. And you would obviously, Karl, you'd obviously think the same for all sports across the board. You just got to let people play the sports at that age, haven't you?
You haven't. And ultimately, Jeremy, you've got to come back to some of the things that we've talked about. Why are you doing this? If somebody's doing it for the purest of reasons and they want to master a sport because the sport fascinates them, I think you can do amazing things and you can have amazing careers. But if it's about making somebody into a world beater, I think if you put enough people into the mix, one or two might come out, but you'll have a lot of damage done. There'll be a lot of dead bodies lying around as a result of the damage that you do to people with that.
Yeah, because I was just about to say, because you look at Tiger Woods and his dad, and you look at the Williams sisters and their dad. For those ones who've been,
they're the outliers.
There's so many others who are just left by the wayside. And I saw people, when I was growing up playing golf. Fortunately, my dad kind of just let me get on with it, and but I saw not loads, but quite a few people fall by the wayside because of pressure from all sorts of different angles that shouldn't have been there. So
yeah,
but and that's something that people know about, but one or two of them just forget about it, and it's living the life through other people, really, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, dangerous thing to do.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been different to talking to Rico and Wei, and certainly different talking to Linny. But it's been a lot of fun, and I've certainly learned a lot today. And I'd never thought I'd hear a Lancastrian speak so highly about a Yorkshireman, but there you go.
Take it all back, Jeremy.
Concept of Scotsman there.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time, and we'll catch up soon.